The young millionaire lawyer fell in love with the waitress who served him daily, but when his friends found out, they plotted a cruel plan to separate them. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air of the small coffee shop on the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue, in the heart of Boston. The doorbell tinkled softly as Alexander Reeves entered, his impeccable suit contrasting with the relaxed atmosphere of the place. His blue eyes scanned the familiar surroundings, unconsciously searching for the face that had become an essential part of his morning routine. There she was, Olivia Parker, with her dark green apron and a warm smile that seemed to light up the whole establishment. Her brown hair was tied up in a messy bun, with a few unruly strands framing her face. Alexander felt his heart racing, as it always did when he saw her. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. The usual?" Olivia asked, already moving towards the coffee machine. Alexander nodded, trying to keep his composure. "Good morning, Olivia." "Yes, please." As he watched Olivia prepare his extra strong latte, Alexander reflected on how his life had changed in recent months. At 32, he was one of Boston's most promising lawyers, a junior partner at the prestigious Goldstein Associates firm. His early success had guaranteed him a considerable fortune and a luxurious apartment overlooking the Charles River. However, it was in this simple coffee shop that he found the peace that his hectic corporate world could not offer. "Here you are, Mr. Reeves," Olivia said, placing the steaming cup on the table. "I hope it's to your liking." Alexander smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "It always is, Olivia. And please, how many times do I have to ask you to call me Alex?" Olivia blushed slightly. "Sorry, it's force of habit." "Alex," she corrected, smiling shyly. At that moment, Alexander's cell phone vibrated insistently in his pocket. He ignored it, preferring to savor these brief moments of conversation with Olivia. "How's your nursing course going?" he asked, genuinely interested. Olivia's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "It's been challenging, but I love every minute of it. Yesterday we had a practical lesson on first aid, which was simply fascinating." Alexander admired Olivia's passion. At 25, she was working as a waitress to pay for her studies, determined to fulfill her dream of becoming a nurse. Her resilience and optimism were qualities that attracted him more and more. "I'm glad to hear that," Alexander replied. "I'm sure you'll make an exceptional nurse." The blush on Olivia's cheeks intensified. "Thank you, Alex. That means a lot." The doorbell rang again, and a group of executives entered, breaking the moment. Olivia gave Alexander an apologetic look before turning away to attend to the new customers. Alexander sighed, taking a sip of his coffee. He knew he was falling for Olivia, but the situation was complicated, not only because of the difference in their social positions, something he personally didn't mind, but knew would be a problem for his colleagues and clients, but also because he feared Olivia might see him as just another rich client. As he finished his coffee, Alexander watched Olivia interacting with the other customers. Her kindness and efficiency were evident in every move. He wondered what it would be like to have that smile directed at him, not just as a customer, but as someone special in his life. His phone vibrated again, reminding him of his responsibilities. With a resigned sigh, Alexander stood up, leaving a generous tip as he always did. "Have a nice day, Olivia," he said, heading for the door. "You too, Alex," she replied, her smile lighting up her face once again. "See you tomorrow." "I wouldn't miss it," Alexander assured her, feeling his heart warm at the prospect. Stepping out onto the busy Boston street, Alexander found himself torn between two worlds, the world of power and prestige he was used to, and the simple, welcoming world Olivia represented. He knew that eventually he would have to make a choice, but for now he was content to live in this precarious balance. Little did he know that his friends had already noticed his frequent visits to the coffee shop and the twinkle in his eye when he spoke of the lovely waitress. In their luxurious offices, they began scheming, determined to protect Alexander from what they considered a potentially devastating mistake for his career. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Olivia was clearing Alexander's table, her heart beating a little faster at the thought of the kind and attractive lawyer. She suppressed her growing feelings, convinced that someone like Alexander Reeves could never be seriously interested in a simple waitress with big dreams. Fate, however, had other plans for Alexander and Olivia. As the Boston sun rose in the sky, casting its golden light over the city, the gears of fate began to turn, setting the stage for a love story that would defy expectations and overcome unimaginable obstacles. The law firm Goldstein Associates occupied the top 3 floors of an imposing skyscraper in Boston's financial center. On the 48th floor, with a panoramic view of the harbor, Alexander Reeves was absorbed in a pile of legal documents when a soft knock on his door snapped him out of his concentration. "Come in," he said, instinctively adjusting his tie. The door opened, revealing Carter Hawthorne, one of the firm's senior partners and Alexander's longtime mentor. Carter, a man in his 50s with grey hair and a cunning smile, entered the room with the confidence of someone used to dominating any environment. "Alex, my boy," Carter began, taking a seat in the chair opposite Alexander's desk. "How's that Berkshire merger case going?" Alexander straightened up, quickly going into professional mode. "It's progressing well, Carter. I've just reviewed the last terms of the contract and I believe we can close the deal by the end of the week." Carter nodded approvingly. "Excellent. I knew I could count on you." He paused, his gaze becoming more penetrating. "But that's not all I came to talk about. Alex, some of us have noticed that you've been distracted lately." Alexander's heart raced, but he kept his composure. "Distracted? What do you mean?" Carter leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Come on, Alex. Your daily visits to that coffee shop on Maple Street haven't gone unnoticed, especially your particular interest in a certain waitress." Alexander felt a knot forming in his stomach. He hadn't expected his visits to the coffee shop to have attracted so much attention. "Carter, The senior partner raised his hand, interrupting him. "Alex, you're like a son to me. I just want to make sure you're thinking clearly. You have a bright future ahead of you. Don't let a pretty face distract you from what's really important." Carter's words, although spoken with apparent concern, carried a tone of warning that did not go unnoticed by Alexander. He felt a surge of irritation, but suppressed it, opting for a diplomatic response. "I appreciate your concern, Carter, but I can assure you that my work is not being affected. My visits to the cafeteria are just a pleasant break in the routine." Carter smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. Just remember, Alex, in this firm, perception is reality. Be careful of the image you're projecting." With those words, Carter got up and left the office, leaving Alexander with an uncomfortable feeling. He knew Carter was right about the importance of image in the firm, but the idea of sacrificing his connection with Olivia for the sake of appearances bothered him deeply. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Olivia was clearing the tables after the lunch rush when her colleague and friend Rachel approached with a mischievous smile. "So, Liv," Rachel began, leaning in conspiratorially, "when are you going to ask Mr. Hot Lawyer out?" Olivia almost dropped the tray she was holding. "Rachel, what are you talking about?" Rachel rolled her eyes. "Please, everyone here has noticed how you two look at each other. It's so obvious that even the regular customers are taking bets on when you'll get together." Olivia's face turned as red as a tomato. "That's ridiculous. Alex is just a nice customer. Besides, he probably has a model girlfriend or something." I didn't see a ring on his finger," Rachel teased. "And the way he looks at you, definitely not the look of a committed man." Olivia shook her head, trying to dispel the thoughts that Rachel's words evoked. "Even if it were true, and it isn't, nothing could happen between us. We're from completely different worlds." Rachel put her hand on her friend's shoulder. "Liv, you're amazing. Smart, beautiful, and with a heart of gold. Any man would be lucky to have you. Don't underestimate yourself." Rachel's words touched Olivia, but she couldn't help feeling a twinge of insecurity. The idea of Alexander Reeves, with all his success and sophistication, taking an interest in her seemed like a dream too far. That night, both Alexander and Olivia found themselves lost in thoughts about each other. Alexander, in his luxurious apartment, gazed out over the city as he swirled a glass of whiskey in his hands. He knew that his visits to the coffee shop had become more than just a coffee break. Olivia had become a beacon of light in his often lonely and stressful life. Olivia, for her part, was sitting at the kitchen table in her small apartment, studying for an anatomy exam. But her mind kept wandering to Alexander's gentle blue eyes and his warm smile. She wondered if there was something more behind his kindness, or if it was just her fertile imagination, fueled by Rachel's teasing. As the night wore on in Boston, fate continued to weave its intricate web around Alexander and Olivia. Unbeknownst to them, forces were already in motion to test their nascent connection. In Carter Hawthorne's office, a secret meeting was taking place. Carter, along with two other partners from the firm, were discussing Alexander's problem in hushed tones. "We need to do something," said one of them. "We can't risk one of our best lawyers ruining his reputation because of an affair with a waitress." Carter nodded gravely. "I agree. I have a plan in mind. It will be unpleasant, but necessary, for the good of Alexander and the firm." As the three men plotted, they were unknowingly about to set in motion a series of events that would test not only the budding love between Alexander and Olivia, but also their own values and integrity. Saturday morning dawned with a gentle mist hanging over the Charles River. Alexander Reeves, dressed casually in jeans and a polo shirt, walked along the riverbank, his thoughts as hazy as the horizon in front of him. Carter Hawthorne's words echoed in his mind, mingling with images of Olivia's warm smile. He stopped, watching a group of rowers cutting through the calm waters of the river. The determination on their faces made him think of Olivia and her dedication to her nursing studies. Alexander wondered how she would be that morning. Was it her day off? Was she studying in a quiet cafe? Without realizing it, his feet took him in the direction of Maple Street. The next thing he knew, he was standing in front of the coffee shop. Through the window, he could see that Olivia wasn't working. A mixture of relief and disappointment washed over him. "Mr. Reeves," a familiar voice called out. Alexander turned to see Rachel, Olivia's colleague, coming out of the cafeteria with a cup of coffee to go. "Hi, Rachel," he greeted, trying to keep his composure. "How are you?" Rachel smiled, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "I'm fine, thanks. Looking for someone special this Saturday morning?" Alexander felt his face heat up. "I was just passing by and thought I'd have a coffee." "I'm sure," Rachel said, clearly not convinced. "Well, if you're looking for Olivia, she doesn't work on Saturdays. She usually spends the morning studying in the park near Massachusetts General Hospital." Alexander's heart raced at the information. "Oh, I didn't know. I mean, not that I was looking for her specifically, but—" Rachel laughed softly. "Mr. Reeves, may I be frank with you?" Alexander nodded hesitantly. "Olivia is an incredible girl. She deserves someone who really appreciates her. If you're interested in her, don't waste your time playing games. Life's too short for that." Rachel's words hit Alexander like a punch in the gut. She was right, of course, but things were more complicated than they seemed. "I appreciate your honesty, Rachel," Alexander finally said. "Olivia is really special." Rachel smiled, pleased. "Well, the park is only a few blocks away, so in case you're interested in a morning stroll." With a wink, she said goodbye, leaving Alexander with his thoughts in turmoil. Meanwhile, in the park near Massachusetts General Hospital, Olivia was sitting on a bench, surrounded by books and notes. The morning sun filtered through the leaves of the trees, creating dancing patterns on their pages. She was trying to concentrate on a particularly complicated chapter on cardiac physiology, but her mind kept wandering to a certain pair of blue eyes. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, closing the book in frustration. "He's just a client. A rich, successful and incredibly kind client." "Talking to yourself, Ms. Parker?" Olivia almost jumped out of her seat when she heard the familiar voice. She looked up to see Alexander Reeves standing a few meters away, a shy smile on his face. "Mr. Reeves, I mean Alex," she stammered, feeling her face heat up. "What are you doing here?" Alexander approached, his hands in his pockets in a posture that seemed almost nervous. "I was taking a walk and, well, to be honest, Rachel mentioned that you usually study here on Saturdays." Olivia's heart leapt. Had he been looking for her? "Oh, yeah, I like the quietness here. It helps me concentrate." "I hope I'm not in the way," Alexander said, sounding genuinely concerned. "No, not at all," Olivia replied quickly, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. She pulled herself together and continued, "Actually, I was thinking of taking a break. Would you like to take a walk?" Alexander's face lit up. "I'd love to." As they walked side by side along the park's winding paths, the initial tension gave way to easy, natural conversation. Alexander was impressed by Olivia's knowledge of medicine and her passion for nursing. Olivia, in turn, was fascinated by Alexander's stories about intriguing legal cases and the ethical challenges he faced in his work. "You really love what you do, don't you?" Olivia observed, noticing how Alexander's eyes sparkled when he talked about his work. Alexander hesitated for a moment. Yes, I do. But sometimes I wonder if it's enough." Olivia looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "It's just that sometimes I feel like I'm missing out on something important in life," Alexander admitted, his voice low and thoughtful. "Success, money, recognition, that's all great, but it doesn't fill the void," Olivia added softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. Alexander felt a deep connection with Olivia, an understanding that went beyond words. The moment was interrupted by the shrill ringing of Alexander's phone. He pulled it out of his pocket, frowning as he saw the name on the screen. "Sorry, I have to take this," he said, taking a few steps away. Olivia watched as Alexander spoke into the phone, his posture visibly changing. When he returned, there was a shadow in his eyes. "Is everything all right?" she asked, concerned. Alexander forced a smile. "Yes, just work. Olivia, I need to go, but I'd really like to continue this conversation. Maybe we can have dinner sometime this week." Olivia's heart raced. "I'd love to," she replied, trying to contain her excitement. They exchanged phone numbers, and Alexander left with one last look back. His heart divided between the joy of the moment they had shared and the anxiety of what awaited him at the office. Meanwhile, in the Goldstein Associates office, Carter Hawthorne hung up the phone, a cold smile on his face. "Phase 1 complete," he muttered to himself. "Now, let's see how long it takes for young Alexander to realize where his priorities really belong." The plan was in motion, and the cogs of fate were turning inexorably. Alexander and Olivia had taken the first step towards each other, but the road ahead was littered with obstacles that would test not only their budding love, but also their deepest values. As the sun rose in the Boston sky, casting long shadows over the park, Olivia returned to her studies, her heart light and full of hope. Alexander, meanwhile, drove back to the office, his heart heavy with the weight of expectations and the choices he knew he would soon have to make. The stage was set for a confrontation between heart and ambition, between love and social expectations. And at the center of it all, two hearts that yearned for a deeper connection in a world that seemed determined to keep them apart. The week that followed their meeting in the park was a whirlwind of emotions for Alexander and Olivia. They exchanged daily messages, their conversations ranging from light-hearted jokes to deep discussions about their hopes and dreams. For both of them, it was as if they had found a long-lost connection. On Wednesday evening, Alexander was waiting anxiously at an elegant restaurant in downtown Boston. He had chosen a discreet spot, away from the prying eyes of his co-workers. His heart raced when he saw Olivia walk in, wearing a simple but elegant dress that accentuated her natural beauty. "You look stunning," Alexander said, getting up to pull out the chair for her. Olivia blushed, a shy smile on her lips. "Thank you. You don't look bad yourself." As the evening progressed, conversation flowed easily between them. Alexander was fascinated by Olivia's passion for nursing and her genuine desire to make a difference to people's lives. Olivia, for her part, was charmed by Alexander's intelligence and compassion, qualities she hadn't expected to find in a successful corporate lawyer. "You know," Olivia said, playing with her napkin, "when we met in the cafeteria, I never imagined we'd be here." Alexander smiled, his eyes twinkling in the candlelight. "Neither did I, but I'm very glad we are." He reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. The touch sent shivers through both their bodies, an electric connection that couldn't be denied. However, the bubble of happiness was abruptly burst when Alexander saw a familiar figure enter the restaurant. Carter Hawthorne, accompanied by two important clients, was being led to a nearby table. Alexander's face paled visibly, something that did not go unnoticed by Olivia. "Alex, is everything all right?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Alexander quickly recomposed his expression. "Yes, everything's fine. I just saw someone from work." Olivia followed his gaze, noticing the older man who was now watching them with a puzzled expression. "Is that your boss?" she asked softly. Alexander nodded, uncomfortably. "One of the senior partners. He doesn't really approve of our friendship." The use of the word friendship fell like a weight between them. Olivia felt her heart squeeze. She knew there was a significant difference in their worlds, but hearing it so clearly hurt her more than she had expected. "I understand," she said, her voice barely masking the pain. "Maybe we should end the night here." "Olivia, that's not what Alexander began, but was interrupted by Carter's arrival at the table. "Alexander, what a pleasant surprise," Carter exclaimed, his voice brimming with false cordiality. His eyes turned to Olivia, a calculating glint in them. "And who is this lovely young lady?" Alexander hesitated for a moment, feeling caught between two worlds. "Carter, this is Olivia Parker. Olivia, this is Carter Hawthorne, one of the senior partners at my firm." Olivia extended her hand politely. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hawthorne." Carter shook her hand briefly, his smile not reaching his eyes. "The pleasure is mine, Ms. Parker. Alexander, when you have a moment, I'd like to discuss the Stevenson case with you. It's urgent." With that, Carter walked away, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Alexander looked at Olivia, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Olivia, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted the evening to end." Olivia forced a smile, but Alexander could see the hurt in her eyes. "It's okay, Alex. I understand. You have responsibilities." They left the restaurant in silence, the romantic atmosphere of the evening completely dissipated. On the sidewalk, Alexander tried once again to explain. "Olivia, what we have is special to me. More than you can imagine." Olivia looked at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But it's not enough, is it? Not to face your world?" The words hit Alexander like a punch in the gut. He wanted to tell her that she was wrong, that he would face anything for her, but the words got stuck in his throat. "I have to go," Olivia said softly. "Good night, Alex." Before he could reply, she turned and walked quickly down the street, leaving Alexander alone with his tumultuous thoughts. Back in her apartment, Olivia threw herself on the bed, the tears finally falling. She knew she was falling in love with Alexander, but now she realized how impossible this situation was. They lived in different worlds, and it seemed that Alexander was unwilling to build a bridge between them. Meanwhile, Alexander returned to the restaurant to talk to Carter. The senior partner was waiting for him with a satisfied smile. "Alex, my boy," Carter began, "I hope I haven't interrupted anything important." Alexander felt a surge of anger, but suppressed it. "What do you want, Carter?" Carter leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "I want you to remember where your loyalties lie. We've got a big case coming up, and I can't have my best lawyer distracted by passing amusements." Carter's words were like poison, but Alexander knew there was truth in them. His career, everything he had worked for, was at stake. "Understood," he replied coldly. Carter smiled, satisfied. "Good. Now about the Stevenson case." As Carter talked about the case, Alexander found himself torn between two worlds, the world of power and prestige that he had always known, and the world of warmth and authenticity that Olivia represented. That night, on opposite sides of the city, Alexander and Olivia lay in their beds, their hearts heavy with doubts and regrets. They both knew they were on the verge of something deep and meaningful, but the obstacles seemed insurmountable. As the night progressed, A storm formed on the Boston skyline, echoing the turbulence in their hearts. The coming weeks would test not only their budding love, but also their deepest values and the strength of their characters. The question hanging in the air was, would their love be strong enough to weather the coming storm, or would it succumb to the pressures of the world around them? The days following the disastrous dinner were a whirlwind of emotions for Alexander and Olivia. The silence between them was deafening, filled only with occasional short messages that barely scratched the surface of what they really wanted to say to each other. Alexander plunged headlong into work, spending long hours in the office, often sleeping on the sofa in his living room. The Stevenson case, mentioned by Carter, proved to be one of the most complex of his career. It was a multi-million-dollar merger between two pharmaceutical giants, with ethical implications that kept him awake at night. One particularly stressful afternoon, Alexander found himself staring out of his office window, his thoughts wandering to Olivia. He hadn't visited the cafeteria since dinner, fearing what he might find in her eyes: disappointment, hurt, or worse, indifference. A soft knock on the door brought him back to reality. It was Samantha, his assistant. "Mr. Reeves, Mr. Hawthorne would like to see you in his office." Alexander sighed, adjusting his tie. "Thank you, Samantha. Tell him I'll be there in a minute." On the way to Carter's office, Alexander passed a group of interns whispering animatedly. Fragments of their conversation reached his ears. "Have you seen it? Boston Legal magazine named you one of the 30 lawyers under 30 to watch. Man, imagine the pressure. He must be on top of the world right now." Alexander felt a knot in his stomach. Recognition, success, everything he had worked so hard for. So why did he feel so empty? Carter welcomed him with a broad smile, a copy of Boston Legal magazine in his hands. "Alex, my boy, congratulations. This is exactly the kind of publicity we need for the Stevenson case." Alexander forced a smile. "Thank you, Carter. It's an honor." Carter leaned forward, his tone becoming more serious. "Alex, you're well on your way to becoming the youngest lawyer to make partner in this firm. Don't let anything or anyone stand in your way." The meaning behind Carter's words was clear. Alexander felt a surge of anger, but suppressed it. "I understand, Carter. My focus is entirely on the Stevenson case." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Olivia was having her own crisis. Sitting in a classroom at the hospital, she tried to concentrate on the lecture on intensive care, but her mind kept wandering to Alexander. "Ms. Parker?" The instructor's voice brought her back to reality. "Can you tell us the signs of hypovolemic shock?" Olivia stammered, her mind blank. Sorry, can you repeat the question?" The instructor frowned, concerned. "Olivia, are you okay? That's not like you." After class, her friend and classmate Jasmine approached her. "Liv, what's going on? You've been distracted all week." Olivia sighed, feeling the weight of her unexpressed feelings. "It's complicated, Jazz. I think I've fallen in love with someone who lives in a completely different world from me." Jasmine hugged her tightly. "Oh, Liv, the heart wants what the heart wants, but you're amazing, and you deserve someone who appreciates you for who you are." Jasmine's words echoed in Olivia, mingling with her own doubts and insecurities. She knew she needed to make a decision about Alexander, but the thought of giving up what they had was too painful to contemplate. That night, both Alexander and Olivia found themselves at an emotional crossroads. Alexander, sitting in his dark office, stared at the cover of the magazine that celebrated him, feeling more alone than ever. Olivia, in her small apartment, flipped through her nursing book, the words blurred by unshed tears. It was at this moment of vulnerability that fate decided to intervene. Alexander's phone rang, Olivia's name flashing on the screen. His heart raced. After a moment's hesitation, he answered, "Hello?" His voice was almost a whisper. "Alex?" Olivia's voice was hoarse, as if she had been crying. I don't know why I'm calling. I just needed to hear your voice." Alexander's heart squeezed. "Olivia, I'm so sorry for everything." There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken words. "Alex," Olivia finally spoke, her voice gaining strength. "I can't go on like this. We need to talk, for real. Alexander closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision he knew he needed to make. You're right. Can we meet tomorrow in the park where we met last time? At 7 p.m., Olivia suggested. I'll be there, Alexander promised. When they hung up, they both felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. They knew that the conversation they would have the next day could change their lives forever. The next morning, the Goldstein Associates office was buzzing. The Stevenson case had taken an unexpected turn, with new evidence emerging that could jeopardize the merger. Carter called an emergency meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. We need someone to go to Chicago immediately and deal with this crisis. His eyes fixed on Alexander. Alex, you're the man for the job. Your flight leaves in 3 hours. Alexander felt the world spin around him. Chicago. Today. But he had promised to meet Olivia. Carter, I have an important appointment tonight. Can't I postpone the trip until tomorrow? Carter's gaze hardened. Alex, this is the decisive moment. What's it going to be? Your career, or whatever this important appointment is? Alexander looked around the room, seeing the expectant faces of his colleagues. Everything he had worked for was there. But then, Olivia's image flashed into his mind. Her smile, her compassion, the way she made him feel alive. At that moment, Alexander Reeves faced the most difficult decision of his life. The path he chose would define not only his future, but also the kind of man he wanted to be. With his heart racing and his palms sweaty, he opened his mouth to give his answer, knowing that his next words would change everything. The silence in the conference room was palpable, all eyes on Alexander Reeves. His heart was pounding against his chest, his tie suddenly seeming too tight. Carter's words were still ringing in his ears. Career or commitment? With a deep sigh, Alexander straightened his shoulders and looked directly into Carter's eyes. I'm sorry, Hi Carter, he said, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. I can't go to Chicago today. I have a commitment I can't and won't break. A murmur of surprise went through the room. Carter, for his part, turned red with anger. Alexander, he hissed, do you understand what you're doing? You're throwing away years of hard work for a date? Alexander didn't back down. Alexander didn't back down. No, Carter. I'm choosing to be the kind of person who keeps his promises. If that means I'm not the right man for this case or this firm, then maybe it's time to reconsider my position here. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving a stunned Carter and a room full of stunned colleagues behind. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Olivia was having her own moment of truth. Sitting in a small hospital room, she stared at a stack of application forms for a nursing exchange program in Africa. This is an incredible opportunity, Olivia. Her mentor, Dr. Rodriguez, said kindly. 6 months working in a rural clinic in Tanzania. That could really open doors for you. Olivia bit her lip, her heart divided. It was a dream she had cherished for years, the chance to make a real difference, to use her skills where they were needed most. But now, with Alexander, I need some time to think, she finally replied. Leaving the hospital, Olivia walked aimlessly through the streets of Boston, her mind a jumble of thoughts and emotions. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She glanced at her watch. She still had an hour before she had to meet Alexander in the park. Meanwhile, Alexander was running through the busy streets, his expensive suit standing out from the pedestrians around him. He had left the office in a flurry, ignoring Carter's shocked stares and incessant phone calls. Arriving at the park 20 minutes ahead of schedule, Alexander sat down on a bench, trying to calm his wheezing and agitated thoughts. What had he done? He had just thrown away years of hard work, his reputation, possibly his entire career. And for what? The answer came in the form of a familiar figure walking along the park path. Olivia. At the sight of her, all the chaos in his mind calmed down. He knew, at that moment, that he had made the right choice. Olivia spotted Alexander, and her heart leapt. He was there, waiting for her, just as he had promised. As she approached, she noticed his disheveled state, the loose tie, the messy hair, an anxious expression on his face that soon turned to relief when he saw her. Alex, she said softly, sitting down next to him. Are you all right? Agitated? Alexander let out a nervous laugh. Agitated is an understatement. Olivia, I just did something that could have destroyed my career. Olivia's eyes widened in shock. What? Alex, what happened? He then told her about the meeting, Carter's ultimatum, his decision to stay. With every word, Olivia's heart squeezed, a mixture of admiration and guilt forming in her chest. Alex, I can't believe you did this for me, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Alexander took her hands in his. No, Olivia, I did it for us. And, honestly, for myself too. I realized that the person I was becoming, always putting work first, wasn't who I wanted to be. Olivia felt a wave of emotion run through her. Here was this man who had sacrificed so much for her, for them, and she was considering leaving for Africa for 6 months. Alex, I have something to tell you too, she began hesitantly. As Olivia explained about the exchange program, Alexander felt his heart sink. After everything he had done, was she still considering leaving? It's an incredible opportunity, Olivia, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Will you take it? Olivia looked deeply into Alexander's eyes, seeing there all the love and vulnerability he was offering. At that moment, she made her decision. No, she replied, a soft smile forming on her lips. I won't. I've realized that what I have here, what we can build together, is more important to me now. Alexander let out a sigh of relief, pulling Olivia into a tight embrace. They stood like that for a long moment, the last lights of the day enveloping them in a golden glow. When they finally parted, they both had tears in their eyes, but also beaming smiles. So, what do we do now? Olivia asked, her voice full of hope and a touch of uncertainty. Alexander smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. Now we start building something together, something real, something of ours. At that moment, sitting on that park bench as the sun set over Boston, Alexander and Olivia knew they were at the start of a new journey. A journey that wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, doubts, moments of uncertainty. But there would also be love, understanding, and the promise of a future built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. As they walked hand in hand through the park, talking about their dreams and fears, plans and hopes, they couldn't predict exactly what the future held. But they were sure of one thing: they would face that future together. Alexander's phone vibrated in his pocket. Another call from Carter, no doubt. But for the first time in his professional life, he ignored it completely. At that moment, walking beside Olivia, he felt truly free. As night fell over Boston, enveloping the city in a blanket of stars, Alexander and Olivia continued their walk, their steps light and their hearts full. They had made their choices, faced their crossroads, and were now ready to face whatever fate had in store for them, together. The rising sun painted the Boston sky in soft shades of pink and gold, a new day announcing itself with promises of possibilities. In Alexander's apartment, the morning silence was broken by the soft sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. Alexander, wearing only pajama pants, was standing in front of the stove, desperately trying to salvage what should have been an omelette. Olivia, wearing one of his oversized shirts, watched with amusement, a cup of coffee in her hands. "You know," she said between laughs, "for someone so skilled in a courtroom, you're surprisingly clumsy in the kitchen." Alexander glared at her, pretending to be offended. "Hey, I'm perfectly capable of— Oh, damn!" he exclaimed as the omelette completely disintegrated in the pan. Olivia placed her cup on the counter and approached him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "How about we leave breakfast to the experts today? I know a great place on Maple Street." Alexander smiled, turning to face her. "You know what? I think it's about time I went back there." An hour later, they walked into the familiar coffee shop, hand in hand. The bell above the door announced their arrival, and several familiar faces turned to look. Rachel, behind the counter, let out a squeal of delight at seeing them together. "Well, well, well," she said with a broad smile. "Look who finally came to his senses." Alexander and Olivia exchanged shy but happy glances. They sat down at a table by the window, the same one where Alexander used to sit every day. "So," Olivia began, her voice a little hesitant. "Have you decided what you're going to do about, well, everything?" Alexander sighed, running a hand through his hair. The last few days had been a roller coaster of emotions and difficult decisions. "Well, as you can imagine, my dramatic exit wasn't very well received at the firm," he said with a wry smile. "Carter made it quite clear that my position there had become complicated." Olivia reached across the table, entwining her fingers with his. "I'm sorry, Alex. I know how much that job meant to you." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. "It did last time, but you know what? For the first time in years, I feel free, like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders." At that moment, Rachel approached with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Courtesy of the house," she said with a wink before walking away. Olivia took a sip, savoring the familiar aroma. "So, what's next?" Alexander smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "Well, remember that pro bono case I mentioned a few weeks ago, about the families being evicted unfairly?" Olivia nodded, remembering how passionately Alexander had spoken about it. "I've decided that I'm going to devote myself entirely to it," he continued. "In fact, I'm thinking of opening my own law firm, focusing on social justice and human rights cases." Olivia's eyes widened with surprise and admiration. "Alex, that's incredible, but it's a big risk, isn't it?" Alexander shrugged, a confident smile on his face. "It is, but for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something truly meaningful, something that makes a difference to people's lives." Olivia felt her heart fill with pride and love. This was the Alexander she had envisioned from the beginning, compassionate, courageous, willing to fight for what was right. "What about you?" Alexander asked. "Any regrets about not going to Africa?" Olivia shook her head, a soft smile on her lips. "None. In fact, I've had an idea. What do you think about combining our talents?" Alexander tilted his head, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Well, you'll be dealing with people who need not only legal help, but also medical care, right? What if I organized a team of volunteer nurses to work alongside your firm? We could offer a more complete service, taking care not only of the legal problems, but also of the health and well-being of these families." Alexander's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Olivia, that's brilliant! It's exactly the kind of holistic approach I was envisioning." They spent the next hour animatedly discussing their ideas, sketching plans on napkins and imagining the possibilities. The coffee went cold, forgotten, as they built their future together, word by word, dream by dream. When they finally left the coffee shop, the sun was high in the sky. The streets of Boston pulsed with life and possibilities. Alexander and Olivia walked hand in hand, their steps light and their hearts full of hope. "You know," Alexander said, stopping suddenly and turning to Olivia, "I think we should celebrate." Olivia raised an eyebrow, a playful smile on her lips. "And what do you suggest, Mr. Reeves?" Alexander smiled, that smile that always made Olivia's heart skip a beat. "How about dinner? This time, no interruptions, no work pressures, just the 2 of us." "Sounds perfect," Olivia replied, standing on tiptoe to give him a soft kiss. As they resumed their walk, Alexander couldn't help but reflect on how his life had changed over the last few weeks. He had left behind the comfort and security of his established career, but in return he had gained something much more valuable, a purpose, a partner, a chance to make a real difference in the world. Olivia, for her part, felt more fulfilled than ever. She had found not only love, but also a way to expand her vocation, to use her skills for the greater good. As they walked through the familiar streets of Boston, now seen through new eyes, Alexander and Olivia knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt, but they would face it all together, strengthened by the love they shared and the common purpose they had found. The future stretched out before them, bright and full of promise, and as the Boston sun shone down on them, Alexander and Olivia walked towards that future, hand in hand, hearts united, ready to write the next chapter of their lives, together. If this story touched your heart, then don't forget to leave a like. Use the super thanks located just below the video to directly support the channel and help create more amazing content. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Now don't miss the next incredible story that's appearing on your screen. I greatly appreciate your support and hope to see you soon. Thank you for watching.